Welcome again to our webinar on the Sustainable States Community Energy Challenge. Before we get into the details, I'd like to note a few logistics. Right now, all attendees are in listen-only mode. Following our remarks and the presentations, we will be opening up the webinar to questions. So at any time during the presentations, please type in any questions you have into the chat box. And we're also recording the webinar and we'll send you a link within a couple days. Next slide, please. So today we have three speakers: Lola Schoenrich, the director of the Sustainable States Network, myself, Dave Ribeiro, senior manager at ACEEE, and Kate Tanabe, a research assistant for the local policy program at ACEEE. To kick things off, I'm going to just start with a quick overview about ACEEE for those of you who may not be familiar with us. Next slide, please. So ACEEE is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. that's actually celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. We work to advance energy efficiency through a combination of research, technical assistance, and outreach. We have a number of technical programs focusing on how to increase energy efficiency in different sectors like buildings, industry, and transportation. And we also have a policy program that works on the federal, state, and local levels to advance energy efficiency. And that's where I spend most of my time. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to Lola to give some background on the Sustainable States Network and the Energy Challenge. So go ahead, Lola.
Thanks, Dave. Can you do the next slide, please? The Sustainable States Network is a network of 13 state-level clean energy and sustainability programs, including the one that you're a part of. It's the programs participating in this project are Sustainable CT, Green Cities, California, Sustainable Maryland, Minnesota GreenStep Cities, and Sustainable Jersey. The programs in the network come together to share resources and best practices, to foster the success of local initiatives, and to collaborate on projects, all with the aim of making sustainability the norm in all communities. And the Sustainable States Community Energy Challenge is one of our projects in partnership with ACEEE. You can go to the next slide. The Sustainable States Community Energy Challenge. It's a partnership between Sustainable States Network, ACEEE, and the 5 state-level programs that I mentioned. The project is designed to help cities participating in it to assess how you're doing on clean energy and energy efficiency compared to other similar cities in your state and in the 4 other states. To get together with your peers, to use that assessment to identify energy efficiency or clean energy project or policy you'd like to work on, and to get some help to get that done through your state program and ACEEE. You can go to the next slide. Through this project, cities, you'll have the opportunity to use the ACEEE local clean energy self-scoring tool. It's the same tool that's used by the cities that participate in ACEEE's annual city scorecard, which you may have seen, but you'll get some help in doing that. We'll plug in the data that you've already reported through your participation in your state program, and as well as other data that's available from national sources, and then you'll have the opportunity to add or correct what might be out of date. We'll have a cohort of each of 6 cities in each state, and you'll have the opportunity to use in quotes, I'm going to put in quotes, the scorecard results to help identify an opportunity to do more. You'll get technical assistance from your state program and from ACEEE. And then we will also have training webinars, several training webinars on topics that are of shared interest to all the cities participating in all of the 5 states. So, but what exactly is the scorecard? Let me turn that back over to Dave.
Great, thanks a lot, Lola. Appreciate that. So yeah, at this point, we want to turn to ACEEE's role and resources, and specifically the self-scoring tool. So as Lola was mentioning, the self-scoring tool is going to be a really important resource for this project, and it's really going to provide the foundation for the community energy challenge. So I'm sure you're all wondering what exactly it is and what you would have to do and all of that stuff. So, let's go to the next slide, please, Maxine. So the self-scoring tool is based on metrics in our city scorecard. So I quickly wanted to walk through that. So the city scorecard is a standalone report that ACEEE does every year, and it benchmarks the clean energy efforts of 100 large cities in the US. It identifies those that excel and those with the most room to improve. The report also highlights action cities can take to achieve their clean energy goals. We developed the scores by evaluating cities on policy metrics across 5 areas, the 5 areas you see on the slide here. So local government operations, community initiatives, buildings policies, energy and water utilities, and transportation. When combined, the scores from each of these 5 areas result in one total score for the city. So the self-scoring tool is set up in the same exact way. It really makes the metrics of the city scorecard available to any city that wants to score itself. So with that, we wanted to spend some time actually walking through the tool so you know exactly what it looks like. And for that, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague, Kate Tanabe. So go ahead, Kate.
Thanks, Dave. On the next slide, Maxine, we'll get started. So the self-scoring tool, as a bit of background, we've been using this tool for about 5 years, and we update it to match the city scorecard metrics with each new edition. The self-scoring tool is a user-oriented spreadsheet, and it allows local governments of any size to assess their own clean energy efforts. So when you open the tool, there will be several spreadsheets to go through. There's a sample on the slide right now, and we can start walking through them. So next slide, please. Great. So this is the page you'll see when you open the self-scoring tool. The landing page has a few items to point out. So the first text box in green is a bit of an introduction and background on the tool. And then the second cluster of cells has some areas to add preliminary information, so community names and population. And then the large text box at the bottom of the screen is an overview of instructions for using the tool. We also have an accompanying user guide that goes into some more detail, but these are just a quick overview there. And then at the bottom of the screen, you'll see different tabs that correlate to each of the policy areas that Dave just mentioned. So you'll walk through each of those as we move on. As a note, when you receive the self-scoring tool, we will have pre-populated it with some info. So inputs like the community name and community population will all be in there, plus some additional scoring info on next tabs. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this is a sample of the page you'd actually use to assess your community. Each page here will have a few different features. So at the top left, there'll be a box to keep a running score of each section. And then in the middle, towards the top, there will be a section for preliminary information. And then there will be a series of boxes related to specific metrics as you go through the rest of the tab. So the first thing you'll want to do is complete the preliminary information box. It determines some of the questions that we ask in the following sections and then runs some automatic calculations. So you'll want to be sure to complete this before moving on, or else there'll be some scoring issues down the line. Next is where the scoring actually occurs. So as an example, you can look at the box under Sustainable Transportation Plan. This is an example of one of the many metrics in the report. So you'll see that the section is kind of set up like a multiple choice test. There's a question in that second column in green. And then to the right of that, there's an area to draft an answer. And then in the third column, I guess fourth really, there's scoring criteria, and there's a drop-down menu, and you can select the option that matches the answer you just drafted the best. And then once you select an option in the fourth column, your score will appear in the fifth column. And finally, in the fifth column, there is a recommended source. And to make this easier, we're also going to make a standalone resource that walks you through potential resources for each metric in more detail. So next page. Thanks. And the last page I'm just going to go over right now is the analysis page. You'll see that this page keeps a running tally of your total scores rather than just each section on the section pages. It'll show you where you've done well and then some areas for improvement. So it presents the max score for each metric, the median score of the metric based on the city scorecard report results, and then your community score. And this will show you your community strengths and then as well as some places to work on. And then to note, the actual city challenge here won't be comparing cities solely based on scores displayed in this tab. We will select some common metrics to evaluate based on your data and results. And that was just a quick overview of the tool, so I'll throw it back to Dave now. Dave, you might be muted.
Kate, I wonder if we've lost Dave.
No, can folks hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Apologies there. I had to switch from the phone to the computer. Anyway, okay. So thanks, Kate, for that. Could you go to the next slide, Maxine? Great. So at this point, I wanted to review the process for scoring cities, should you decide to participate in the challenge. So when ACEEE gets confirmation that a city will participate, the first thing we'll do is begin completing the self-scoring tool for your city. So as Kate and Lola were saying, the self-scoring tool pulls from some central sources in some places. So we'll go ahead and take care of all of that for you. We also use some regional data as well for utilities. So if we already have that information, we will also complete that as well. The next step is that we would deliver the self-scoring tool to the state programs, who will do a quick review and then pass it along to staff in the cities and communities to complete. At that point, the community staff will go ahead and review it and send it back to the state programs, who will send it back to us at ACEEE. We will review it, get in touch if we have any questions, and then finalize the results. So in terms of the timeline here, so the scoring process will happen on a rolling basis in May and June. And so as soon as the names of cities are given to ACEEE, we'll start turning things around within 2 weeks. So, you know, the first you would hear from us in terms of a self-scoring tool would likely be the end of May. And then the work would be completed in June going on. In terms of the actual challenge we were talking about, where we'd be doing the comparison, the results of that would come out later in the year in August or September. And the webinars in TA would also begin in August as well. Next slide, please. So if you are interested in joining, I'd encourage you to connect with your state network lead to confirm your participation. And as we said before, we can only take 6 cities or towns per state. So if demand is high, you know, we may not be able to take everyone who requests to join. So just wanted to let folks know that. So if you don't know already, the slide here contains the person you should be in touch with if you are interested in joining. Next slide, please. Okay, and so at this point, we wanted to take some questions, and we wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. So we have until well, we have another 13 minutes. So if you have a question and haven't done so already, please feel free to type that into the chat box, and we will get to it. So at this point, Kate, have we gotten any questions?
Yes, we have a few coming in. Let's see, I can start with some of them now. So one is, I work for a town, not a city. Can my town still participate? Are you specifically looking for cities?
Yeah, so this is open to any community. Smaller towns are welcome, as well as larger cities. So one of the things that Kate was mentioning before is that when we get to the actual the challenge and the comparison, we're not going to be scoring cities solely on their scores in the self-scoring tool. We will be doing some bucketing likely of comparing cities of similar size, and so in those cases, there may be some metrics that only apply to larger cities and some that would be smaller. But that being said, anyone is welcome to join the energy challenge.
Great. Another question is, can you review the timeline again? And how much time will the city have to review the data?
Sure. So, starting with today, I guess. So after this webinar, the hope is that by early next week, folks will confirm their participation. And then that would start a clock with ACEEE, where we would begin reviewing self-scoring tools and pre-populating them, rather. We would do that within the next 2 or so weeks. We would then send it to the state program leads, who would have a week or two to review it. And at that point, it would go to the staff in cities and communities. So by the end of the month, excuse me, by the end of the month, communities will begin receiving that. And then in June, folks will have 2 to 3 weeks to review everything that we have done and to make corrections, add additional information, and turn it back to us. And that at that point, that's when ACEEE will review everyone's scores in July or so, and maybe reach out with some clarifying questions, all that sort of stuff. And then by August and September, we'll be able to actually come out with the results of the challenge and get the technical assistance up and running.
Great. Going off of that, there are a few questions regarding technical assistance, and one is, what exactly is technical assistance?
Sure. So maybe I'll just start here, and then Lola, if you want to jump in. So technical assistance, I think, is just the broad term we're using as a way of saying that ACEEE and the state programs can provide some type of guidance and resources to communities focused on moving along a specific process, a specific policy or specific program. So I don't want to define it too narrowly, because at the end of the day, we expect that there will be different needs in cities when it gets to that technical assistance. So the technical assistance in one state might look a little bit different than technical assistance in another state. But at the end of the day, it's going to be focused on identifying the needs in communities in different states, and working with them through either a series of webinars or some other form of assistance to provide the resources they need to move forward on a specific intervention, a specific initiative. But Lola, did you have any other thoughts on that?
I think the other thing I would add to that is that it may depend too on what it is people in cities want to work on, because the state programs are typically quite good at bringing in other resources from your state that might be able to help with something. And so I think that's a possibility too. So it may vary a bit depending on what people want to work on and what the resources are in their state.
Great. And I think some people are just wondering if you have any examples of technical assistance, Dave. Maybe you could list some of those, the past projects.
Sure. So a few different things come to mind. So in the past, ACEEE has worked with, groups of communities through working groups to sort of talk through what is energy efficiency, and sort of provide a guidebook if you're interested in these different aspects of energy efficiency. Here are some resources that you can use to sort of take those next steps forward as your community begins thinking about, is this a program that they might want to start? Is this a policy that they might want to, to pursue? In other cases, it's much more focused. So there are times when we have worked with a specific city who, has a very narrow question, such as, we are interested in outdoor lighting retrofit programs and want to write an RFP. What are some good examples that you have in terms of other communities that have done this and things we might want to keep in mind? So I think those are sort of both ends of the spectrum, from the more general to the more focused. But Lola, you have any other thoughts there?
Sure. I can give a couple of examples of the kind of technical assistance Minnesota GreenStep Cities has been able to provide in the past. For instance, we just recently wrapped up a cohort of cities that were all working on vehicle electrification and fleet analysis, and we were able to partner with a couple of the area utilities that provided free use of the Fleet Karma tool to help communities evaluate their fleets and decide which vehicles made the most sense to electrify. Another example is that there last year were several communities interested in commercial building energy benchmarking. In Minnesota, one of the counties has a kind of a turnkey system. So we were able to work with the county and help the communities that were interested think through the steps in passing a commercial building energy benchmarking policy, and partner with the county and one of the state agencies that help the communities understand what that turnkey system is like, what it would cost, and how to really get a program like that up and running.
Great. Another question is, is there a cost to participate in the challenge, and when communities are getting in contact with the state leads to let them know they want to participate, do they need to is it an informal email or just a more formal letter?
There's no cost to participate, and I don't think we require a formal note. Just letting the program leads, I think, is enough. Though Lola, if I'm remembering correctly, feel free to correct me on that.
That seems right.
Okay.
I think the email to the program lead would be the right next step.
Okay. Another question that we got is there an equity component, and does the scoring account for any relative wealth among towns when looking into performance?
So there is an equity component. So, we didn't get into this level of detail, but there's 100 points in the city scorecard and the self-scoring tool, and something like 12 to 15 of those focus on equity. We do largely focus on best practices and policies and programs. So, the things we look at are, does your community, does your city take an equitable approach to, sustainability planning, climate action planning? Does your city have, workforce development components that are aimed towards low and moderate income households, availability of utility efficiency programs for low income households. So those are sort of the things we look at. We don't take into account anything such as the wealth of the community. We are really just focused on the policies and programs. So we do not do any sort of normalization based on that.
Great. Another question we've gotten is, can you give some examples of different policy topics that the webinars might cover?
Yeah, so, I think it might be a little early. Well, let me put it this way. One of the things we're hoping is that the results of the self-scoring tools across all of the communities provide sort of a roadmap for what types of webinars would be most helpful. What are the ones that would speak to needs across, different communities. So, I don't think there's specifics that we can really get into. I guess talking more generally, I can certainly foresee some sessions perhaps on, how to address energy efficiency in new buildings that might focus on codes, or if you can't adopt a code, other mechanisms to increase energy efficiency there, perhaps something on existing buildings with a specific policy mechanism of interest. And perhaps something on public outdoor lighting if that's a big interest. So those are just a couple of the ideas, I kept them broad because I didn't want to get too narrow at this point. But we're hoping that the self-scoring tool results will provide a pathway there.
Great. I guess we have time for maybe one more, but will participants be, a list of participants be available to the other cities and towns once they decide to participate?
Lola, I'm not sure if we discussed this. I know later in the process, when we do the benchmarking, that will all be available. I don't think we discussed when we'd let everyone know who else was in the challenge. But Lola, did we chat about this?
I don't think we did, but it's a good question, and I bet you all would be interested in who else is participating. So I think unless anybody would object, we would share that early in the project.
Mm-hmm. Yep, sounds good. And maybe we have time for one more question, Kate, if we still have one.
Sure. If the town does not own a water, electric, or sanitary sewer system, do you include policies from these utility companies?
Yes, we do. So, the self-scoring tool looks at what cities themselves are doing, but obviously, independent entities can also affect the energy efficiency efforts or the levels of savings that a community can achieve. So if a community is served, let's say, by a investor-owned electric utility, we still look at that city's efforts. Similarly, if the drinking water utility or wastewater utility is not owned by the city, we would also look at those as well. So at this point, we're right at time. So if we didn't get to any questions that you had, we do have a record and we can quickly go through and follow up with folks individually. We also have the contact information for Lola, myself, and Kate on this slide here, so feel free to send us a note. But otherwise, I hope folks are interested in the challenge, and if you are, please feel free to get in touch with your state program leads. So Lola, before I close it up, any last comments from you?
I too hope that you all are interested in participating.
Great.
Then thank you for joining us on the webinar.
Yes, thanks to everyone. Hope everyone is doing well, stay well, and take care.